Hey there, art nerds! Today I have a very special treat for you guys. Today we're taking a look at the Tombow ABT markers. I gotta say, I was pretty excited when I heard Tombow was dipping a toe into the alcohol marker world. They generally make great art supplies and have made some of my favorites, like the Tombow Fudenosuke. I'm not a huge fan of Tombow ABT markers. I prefer the Zig Art and Graphic Twig and the Twin and the Zig Clean color, but I figured they would do something interesting if they decided to make alcohol markers. Sadly, a few friends on the paint box warned me that Tombow ABT was not all it's cracked up to be. Let's take a look at this 5-piece marker set, the green tones, and see why. These were purchased at Michael's at 50% off, so they aren't new by any means. There's a wide variety of color sets as well as larger sets. Sets are either 5-piece color theme sets or 12-piece theme sets. At this time, the Tombow ABT markers do not seem to be sold open stock. 5-piece sets are monochromes, the 12-piece sets revolve around themes like nature, manga, etc. And I do want to point out that the Michaels site actually does have them open stock, and the Blick site has them open stock, but Tombow, the site, does not have them open stock. And you guys can find links down in the description below, as well as a transcript of this review. So, Tombow ABT Pro. There's 107 total colors plus a blender. Brush and chisel tip. These are not refillable. And there are 10 color families. YG, Y, YRR, RVV, BVB, BGG. So ranging from yellow-green all the way back around to green. And these run open stock at $5.99 each, which puts them a little bit pricier than the Blick Studio brush markers, which are some of my favorite Copic competitors, and about the same price as Prismacolor markers. So, do they compare to other alcohol markers already on the market? We're just going to have to find out together. So the packaging is reusable plastic packaging. It's fairly sturdy. For this pack of 5, they retail for around $29.99 on the Tombow site, $26.99 on the Michaels site, and $22.46 on the Blick site, and $22.99 on Amazon. So don't pay full price. I waited around until these were about half off. And I can't find any mention of the Tombow ABT Pro on the Japanese Tombow site, but regular ABT markers are all over the place. Apparently, Tombow ABT water-based brush markers are older than I am. So these have a brush and chisel tip. It has a nylon brush tip, which promises flexibility, fast drying ink, that would be alcohol in this case, and a single ink reservoir, so color should match on both ends. Color matching isn't normally an issue with alcohol markers, but it's nice to know that they should match, and of course, being alcohol based, they are permanent and only soluble with alcohol and alcohol solvents. So my goal is to not only talk about these markers, but to demonstrate how to use a coordinated color set to make beautiful art. So this video is not just a review, it's also a field test and tutorial. The packaging is plastic reusable packaging. It's taped shut, and the tape was difficult to see and difficult to remove. If they used a paper tape, it would be much easier for people to see and remove. The packaging itself, like I said, is reusable. It seems fairly sturdy, and inside we receive 5 colors with no blender. I don't know if the blender comes in some of the larger sets, or you would have to buy the blender separately open stock. And I believe when I saw these at Michael's, I didn't yet see them open stock in person. Otherwise, I would have gone ahead and picked up a blender. So the markers themselves have slick plastic caps and a matte body. The color name is screened on the body, not on the cap, which is a little bit unusual for alcohol markers. They're very similar to the Tombow ABT markers, and I will compare those two in a little bit. So the brush tip seems to be compressed fiber, which if you watch my channel, you know I am not a fan of. It tends to fray and get mushy and tear up the paper, and oh, Tombow, why? However, the chisel tip seems really nice, kind of comparable to the tri-chisel tip on old Prismacolors, so that's cool. I would have liked to have seen them put the same care in the brush, but you know. And the caps have a notch to prevent them from just rolling off the table. But if you remove both caps, these things are super roll prone. So here's a close-up coming up of the brush tip, so hopefully you guys can see what I see, as well as a close-up of the chisel tip. Just a reminder, these were purchased out of my own pocket from funds raised on Patreon. So if you enjoy the work I do here on this channel, one of the ways you can ensure that I continue to do it without accepting too many sponsorships from companies is by joining me on Patreon, and there'll be a link to that down in the description below. Alright, so let's compare these to the original, the OG, the Tombow ABT. So at the top, we're going to have the Tombow ABT Pro. It is a dye ink in an alcohol solvent. It should be compatible with other alcohol markers. It features a brush and a chisel. It is not acid-free, being alcohol-based, and it may eventually eat through your paper. They are made in Vietnam. The color code begins with a P, maybe that means Pro, and then 3 digits. They're a bit whiffy due to alcohol solvent, so if you're sensitive to fumes, these may be a problem. Both caps are color designated, but there's only a hint to the color inside. These are not refillable. The regular OG Tombow ABT, the dye ink is water solvent. It's compatible with other water-based markers, and it can be blended out with a blender or water. Slightly slimmer body, brush and bullet nib, acid-free, made in Japan, color code is 3 digits, basically odor-free, color collar on the bullet nib, and not refillable. And it does make me wonder if the two systems are compatible, if the 000 in one is the same as the P000 in another. So the Tombow ABT seemed really similar to a couple of other Japanese markers. You guys have already been spoiled as to that. That would be the Color and the Neopico color markers. So let's go ahead and compare them. The Tombow ABT Pro, not refillable. Refill inks are also not available. You could maybe drop a refill if you really want to. It's a Japanese parent company. Slim body, caps are fairly easy to remove. Both caps are color-coded. It has the largest brush of the 3, and they have a brush and chisel. The Color Kuretake alcohol markers have been available for a while in different iterations. They are refillable, and refill inks are available online. It has a Japanese parent company, Kuretake, a slim body, and only one cap is color-coded, and these have a brush and a bullet nib. The Neopico color, Neopico has been on the market for a long time, and their alcohol markers have seen several different iterations. They are made by the Deleter company, and they are not that common outside of Japan. They're refillable, and the refill inks are online. They have a Japanese parent company. They have a slim body. Both caps are color-coded, and they have brush tips and bullet tips, but they have more options on the website. Color and Neopico Color use the same body and cap, just a slightly different branding, which makes me wonder if they share the same parent company. All 3 brands also have water-based markers available in their lineup, but let's focus on the ones most common in the West. You have the Tombow ABT, which has a mediocre fiber brush, kind of a crummy bullet nib. The Tombow brush has a question mark brush, because we haven't tried it yet. Nice looking chisel. The Color Art and Graphic Twin has a flexible foam rubber brush and kind of a crummy bullet nib. It's one of my favorite of the water-based markers. The Art and Graphic Twin Real Brush has a flexible brush with individual hairs and a crummy bullet nib. And the the Neopico makes the Neopico 4, which I didn't show here. I apologize for that. Those are all right too. So let's go ahead and compare these to other alcohol markers on the market. We have the Prismacolor, which is a brush and bullet, the Copic Chow, which is a brush and chisel, the Copic Sketch, which is brush and chisel, the Blick Studio, which is brush and chisel, the Ohuhu Brush, which is brush and chisel, the Color, which is brush and bullet, the Neopico, which is brush and bullet, and the Tombow ABT Pro, which is brush and chisel. So the Prismacolor is not refillable. Copic Chow and Copic Sketch are refillable. Blick Studio Brush is refillable. Ohuhu Brush is not, to my knowledge, refillable, but Ohuhu updates their product line pretty frequently, so I may have just missed that update. Color is refillable, Neopico are refillable, and the Tombow ABT are not refillable. And this isn't an all-inclusive list, but it does cover a pretty decent range. If you want more alcohol marker reviews beyond just these, but also including these, I have those here on this channel as well, and I hope you guys will check them out. I'll link them in the cards for you. So most alcohol markers have a color designator on the cap. Prisma, Neopico, Copic, Sketch, Ohuhu, and Blick Studio have at least a color code. Some have a color name as well. Almost all have the color name and code on the body, with the exception of Ohuhu, although Color and Neopico include this information in the barcode sticker, which is often removable. Now, the Tombow Europe site promises that these markers are for professionals, so I'm going to judge them accordingly. Tombow also refers to this as ABT Pro is a filigree drawing tool and promises that it'll be comfortable with extended use. As a marker artist with arthritis, I hope they're right. So generally, I prefer alcohol markers that have foam rubber brushes. They're more flexible, they're juicier, you can really saturate the paper, and I find them easier to use without tearing up the paper. The Ohuhu and the Tombow ABT are the only markers in this lineup that don't have that flexible foam rubber brush. Different artists have their preferences, so your preference may differ from mine, but that's just my opinion, and a lot of my marker tutorials do utilize that brush heavily. So it's something I definitely look for when I'm reviewing markers. Alright y'all, so let's start with the swatching. When I'm swatching and field testing, I'm looking for certain qualities. I'm looking for flexibility in the brush tip, a fiber brush tip fraying or going mushy with use, streakiness, inability to keep up with my coloring, fraying or degradation of the mixed media paper, so tearing up my paper, bleeding, blendability, and compatibility with other blenders. And here are a few of my other alcohol marker reviews as well, so like the swatches, the blending tests, and then the field tests. And all of these are on this channel, so if you're interested in more alcohol marker goodness, I've got you covered. And if you're looking for tutorials on how to use inexpensive alcohol markers, I've got tutorials for that. So you guys just saw field tests for Milo Art, Milo Pro, Shuttle Art, and Ohuhu brush markers. So I will admit I have a bit of a prejudice. I buy and review a lot of markers and definitely have my favorites. $5.99-ish per marker is pretty steep, especially for a non-refillable marker that may be prone to fraying. Tombow makes big promises, but so far I'm not seeing big innovation, and I had high hopes for an art supply and stationery company that generally seems like they know what they're doing. So I am swatching and field testing in my Old Faithful, a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. We're on the 4th one now, can you guys believe it? And as this is what I use for all of my alcohol markers reviews, I'm going to continue to use it. It allows me to have kind of a standardized baseline. It's not the best paper in the world, but it's fairly inexpensive, available just about everywhere, and it's something that a lot of artists are going to have access to. So when swatching, the brushes seem a little dry and the inks seem a little bleedy. The chisel is indeed a tri-tip. It's really nice. I wish more companies would opt for this rather than a bullet nib or the really crummy cheap chisel nibs. Looking at you, Copic, you could definitely do better. These kind of tri-tip chisel nibs are way better. You get 3 lines easy peasy out of this. The brush doesn't have much flexibility. The ink flow in the brush struggles to keep up with mark making, and it seems like it'd go dry fast. This leads to fraying, and this brush already seems prone to fraying, so it's a big ding right there. So when blending, we're going to test out a few different things here. Right now, we just have a straightforward color into color blend where we blend back out with the prior color. The ink flow in these definitely seems like it can't keep up. They blend, okay. They're not the best, they're not the worst, but I think the Spectrum Noir TriBlend markers do blend a little bit better than these. Come on, Tombow, you need to be competing with Copic on this one. So the thing is, alcohol markers have been available on the American market for a really, really long time, like since the 70s. This is not a new idea. They're not bringing innovation. And generally, I really like and stand by Tombow products, so I had high hopes and high expectations for the Tombow ABT markers. Even after I'd been warned about them, I was kind of hoping that I might find some redeeming points that makes the brush better. I mean, that's how I feel about the Ohuhu brush markers. It's not the best brush in the world, but Ohuhu's price point can't be beat. And for the price, they are great brush markers. I cannot say that for these markers here. Even at half price, around $16, they're just not worth it. So next, we're gonna do the blender compatibility test. We're testing rubbing alcohol, the Blick Studio brush blender, Artist Loft blender, the Copic blender, and the Ohuhu blender. So a wide variety of blenders. I would test the Tombow ABT Pro blender, but my Michaels didn't have these open stock, so I wasn't able to grab them. This test is fairly straightforward. I'm just going to make 5 large marker squares on the paper and then either drip my solvent in or brush my solvent on, and then note how much it affects the marker underneath it. And what I'm also looking for is I'm looking for reactivity, how much it pushes the marker to the back of the paper, as well as speckling. I don't really use the blender too much, but this does tell me how well these would play with other alcohol markers, which is important to me. I highly advocate that if you want to use alcohol markers, don't be brand loyal. Buy whatever brands you enjoy using and whatever markers play nicely together for your art. So first we did the rubbing alcohol. Next is the Blick Studio. Then the Artist Loft. This is I think it's like the middle release of the Artist Loft marker. It's not bad. I have a full review of the older one as well as the newer ones here on the channel. Here is the Copic. And then finally we have the Ohuhu. That's such a fun name to say. So all solvents cause at least some reaction, with Copic and Ohuhu having the most reaction. Alright, so next we're doing the ball blending test. This is an important test because it's kind of a real world scenario for these markers. I'm going to draw a ball, leaving a white highlight, and blend out with all the colors, creating hopefully a soft transition between all 5. And I'm using the Copic blender to blend out the lightest color. So these things are really dry, especially P131, sorry. And that's the first color I'm starting with here. So at first I tried to be careful about it, and then I was like, this thing's going to be streaky regardless, so I'm just going to put the color down. I have legit concerns about doing a whole illustration with these. I feel like the lighter colors will just die out on me before I'm done. And that's just one illustration. I will admit, I am working on a mixed media paper, which is a thirstier paper, not a marker paper or Bristol like Tombow recommends. I work on a variety of papers with markers, but I particularly like thick, thirsty papers like cellulose-based watercolor paper, Bristol, and mixed media papers, because you can really get gentle blends. This is my preferred and usual use, so when I'm testing these, I'm testing them the way I would normally use them. And I have a lot of tutorials on this channel where I use those thicker, thirstier papers, so I'm not trying to be unduly harsh by using a paper like this. This is what I normally go for. The color selection in this set of 5 is a bit weird. There's a mix of warm and cool tone greens, which makes some of the blending transitions iffy at best. It'd be fine if it started with warm and then went to cool, but it's like warm, mid-tone, cool, warm. I went with greens because I love greens, and I thought they'd be a fun monochrome challenge, but this set is just kind of odd. And these are really whiffy. They're not the strongest smelling alcohol markers I've ever reviewed, but if you're sensitive to strong smells, these are not for you. So here's our blended ball. It's not actually that bad, but considering how my markers were running dry as I was doing this ball, that's definitely a big ding for me. You guys saw me open these markers. They're basically brand new. They shouldn't be running dry this quickly. And I know I do color kind of fast, but I should be able to keep up with them with the brush tip. So it's definitely kind of disappointing. So that was my brush tip. It's already showing some wear, some fraying, and the chisel tip, which frankly, you're not going to see me use that often just because that is not my preferred method of handling alcohol markers. I would suggest that Tombow strongly consider retooling the brush on this and maybe retooling the ink flow to be able to keep up. I've watched some of their demonstration videos, and it seems like they're often used for very sketchy illustrations. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I do feel like it's difficult to say that this is a filigree drawing tool and that it's for professional artists when it may just have a really limited use. So you can see some of the fraying on this brush tip, how it's already white. That's a signifier that it's kind of running dry. That's going to be really prone to fraying and pilling as you're kind of coloring on the paper. The chisel tip is way better designed, and I really like their chisel tip. I would hate to see them just like completely scrap this product. I'm really hoping with some feedback, maybe not just from me, there's several other artists I've talked to have expressed disappointment in these markers. I'm hoping that maybe they will take that to heart and retool it and revisit it. So when you're done with your Tombow ABT Pro markers, you can just pop them back in this plastic box, shut the lid, and put it away. It does pack up nice and compact, and this definitely helps prevent you from losing them. So these are longer alcohol markers than any other alcohol markers, minus the chameleon markers, which are just their own unique animal. These are probably not gonna fit in whatever storage solution you use for your Copics, if it's like size to your Copics. Like these are gonna be a tough fit in like a pencil box. Or I have these like sliding little drawers I got from the Container Store. These won't fit in that. So if you've already got some alcohol markers going, this might kind of disrupt your whole system. And I certainly wouldn't recommend you just start with these. So the colors in this set are 131, 133, 126, 177, and 249. All right, so I told you guys this would be a double header. We're gonna do a monochrome field test illustration in the same Strathmore Mixed Media sketchbook, just a few pages over. And, you know, this particular branding and packaging really reminds me of the Spectrum Noir TriBlend markers, which are like 3 markers in one, and they promise really smooth, easy blending. And I think they have a brush marker out, but I still haven't seen it in the wild. So if you've seen it, let me know where to get it. Anyway, I've reviewed the TriBlend markers on this channel and demonstrated them several times. So if you're looking for really easy to blend markers that, you know, kind of come with the blends picked out for you, you should check out my TriBlend review and see if it's a good fit. I also have a tutorial where I show you how to pick your own color blends using like triads of color for easy blending, which you might want to check that out as well. So these things are so dry. Techniques that work for Copic, Blick, and Prisma do not work with these. How are these so dry with so little use? And then the brushes start deteriorating and leaving grit all over the place. It's honestly a little bit gross, and it's definitely disconcerting. And I feel like I've only had that happen with like a couple of other brands of markers, and those were really cheap ones. So it's like, Tombow, what is this? What is going on? So since this is a 5-piece set, I'm going to use all of the colors. So I started out with 131 as my base color, and I blended that out. And I even used it on Kara's skin. Now, it doesn't look nearly this fluorescent in real life. It's the sort of green that cameras just don't love. For the leaves, I'm starting with 133 as like the base color to kind of build it up, because that's how I work, is I build up my colors. And you can see how streaky and dry this is. So normally I use a technique where I kind of oversaturate, or I saturate the paper to get smooth transitions and smooth blends. And I'll go over an area a couple of times if I'm just trying to do a flat layer of color. And that definitely drains ink fast. I will be honest about that, but it shouldn't drain it this fast. Next, I'm going over it with 126, I think, or this might be 177. And this is kind of like our middle green. As you can see, even though we pre-saturated the leaf with a lighter color, we're still getting a lot of streaking. You can blend some of that back out with the lighter color, but it's just really disappointing to see that much streaking. And then for our shadow tone, I'm using 246. And I hope you guys can see how some of these greens are cool greens, some of these greens are warm greens. So 131 is just the lightest green. It's kind of in the middle. It could go either way. It's so light, it could go either way. 133 is a cooler green. 126 is like an olive green. 177 is a warmer green, like a fur green. And then 246 is like a cool blue green. So their color selection for the greens is a little bit weird, because you would think they'd like start warm and then go cool, or do all warm greens or all cool greens, but they kind of waffle in between. And it makes it hard to use this as like a monochrome product or like an easy blend product. So I'm getting pretty strong Jack and the Beanstalk vibes from this. This is my character, Kara. She's the main character of my comic 7-inch Kara, which is the story of a tiny, adorable girl exploring the much larger world around her. It updates on Fridays, and if you just enjoy heartwarming reads in watercolor, because it's a watercolor comic, I think you guys will really enjoy 7-inch Kara. And we just had a successful Kickstarter for Volume 2. Yay! So Volume 1's been in print for a while. Volume 2 is about to be in print, and you can read the first 7 chapters for free. I think that's about as good as it can get. So I wanted to focus on filling in the leaves first, since I already knew what colors I wanted to use for it and how I wanted to handle it. I decided to let the leaves kind of dictate the contrast, and then I was going to base Kara's clothing and the colors used in her clothing off the leaves, so it creates some contrast there. And that's a cheaty technique I use, especially when I'm doing field tests and I haven't like 100% planned out the whole thing, is I'll color the largest areas, or I'll color the most important areas, or I'll color the areas that I already know what colors I want them to be, and then I'll kind of work around that and choose my colors from there. So for the stem, I started with 177, the warmer second darkest green, and I'm just going to add 249 on top of it just to kind of add in some shadow here and there. And you guys can see how streaky and how dry these are. I do think the fact that they're a slimmer marker could mean that there's a slimmer wick inside, because most alcohol markers are not just like alcohol sloshing around. That would evaporate really quickly. They are a wick, kind of like Crayolas have a wick, and they're saturated with ink, and that kind of helps them stay moist over time. And I think the wick is probably thinner and can't really keep up with the ink flow of coloring a piece. So these could be okay for sketching, but I can't really see them being a lot of fun for coloring. And at $5.99 open stock, they're more expensive than a lot of other alcohol markers on the market, even other open stock markers. Like the Blick Studio brush markers are usually around $3 or $4, and if you buy more than 10, they start getting cheaper, and then if you get them in sets, they really start getting cheaper. Or like the Ohuhu markers are just always a lot cheaper, and they also use a fiber brush, and they're also debatably not refillable, but they're just so much cheaper. So, you know, generally, I try not to get too hung up on the price point of markers, because you know, sometimes cheap ones can be great, sometimes cheap ones can be terrible, and I've got pretty set biases about preferring foam rubber nibs and wanting a big juicy brush and really wanting to just be able to saturate the paper with color, because I utilize over blending to get those soft blended transitions. So like, I know how I handle markers is kind of unique to how I work and how some of my friends work. And I know it's not necessarily what every artist uses, but I do feel like it's important to mention that these are really, really dry. So once I finish with the background, I'm going into Kara's face with 133. So our second darkest, or our second lightest green, and then 126 for her hair to start the base color for her hair. And working smaller, the markers are able to keep up with that just a little bit better, but it's still not a fun coloring experience. I enjoyed doing this piece, I really did, but I would have enjoyed it more with, like, I kept thinking, like, I would have more fun with Ohuhu markers, or I would have more fun with Prismacolor markers, or I would have more fun with Blick and Copic markers, and that's not a good thought to be thinking. That's usually the thought I think when I'm working with, like, scratchy bullet nib markers that are not fun to blend. So, and like I said, the brushes on these started deteriorating and leaving grit all over the place, which definitely did not help with my user experience. And as someone who purchased this product out of pocket, you know, you have expectations that it's going to perform well and it's going to be fun to use and that you'll enjoy using it. Which is so disappointing, because there's so many Tombow products I'll stand. Like, I love their mono erasers. I love all of their mono erasers, from the super tiny ones to like the chunky block erasers. And I love their Fudenosuke pens. And I love a lot of their brush pens too. So these markers just kind of left me scratching my head and being like, what the heck-a-rooney, Tombow? What's going on here? I mean, you knew when you brought these markers onto the market, you were going to be competing with established companies that have good reputations in the US, as well as some really nice cheap markers. So why didn't you bring some real competition here? So for her clothing, for her shirt, I started with 126 and then shaded with 177. For her pants, I started with 177 and shaded with 249. And since they're kind of contrasted against the lightest part of the leaf, it helps it pop out. And then for her shawl, I started with 131. That's the color that looks like it's neon, but it's really not. And shaded with 133. And just having a mix of warm and cools, but they're not like 3 cools and 3 warms. They're like just kind of a mix. It makes it difficult to use color theory to make colors recede into the background and colors come forward into the foreground too. So I didn't I mean, I only kind of cursory looked at the other Tombow ABT Pro sets, to be real, because I really wanted the green set. So I don't know if that's, like, I don't know for a fact. I didn't spend like 10 minutes in Michael's ogling Tombow ABT Pro Markers. That sounds like something I would do, but no, it wasn't me. The other sets don't seem to have this problem. So this is kind of like my lineless marker style, but we're going to add some lines to it. And these are the Artnerds Sai Thin Line brush pens. I really like these. I did a review of these. These are alcohol marker safe and waterproof, so you could have inked this first and then markered on top of it. But I like to, when I can, marker first. That's why I use the color pencil underneath. And those are actually Uni Nano Dia leads, the green leads for that. But this allows me to kind of selectively ink and to leave more areas uninked or lighter in color. And I'm using kind of the teal, the dark teal blue green. It's like a piney kind of green. And then they have a kind of like a dark olive green. So I'm using the piney kind of green, the blue green, to do the shadows. And then I'm using the olive green to do the lighter areas, because things that are inked with cooler colors tend to recede into the background, and things that are inked with warmer colors tend to come forward in the background. And it's color theory, Tombow. So these are actually made by Artnerds, another Japanese company that makes pretty great art supplies, pretty great stationery supplies. And I wish their stuff was more popular here in the US, particularly these thin line brush pens, because they're really cool. So regarding the Tombow ABT Pros, I do not like these. I do not recommend them. I prefer the Spectrum Noir's bullet tip TriBlend markers for a monotone or a monochrome marker that's easy to blend. I know, like, foolproof blending is very tempting. I too enjoy foolproof blending, and, you know, being able to buy one marker that has 3 colors and they all go together is a lot of fun. It makes for some really fun monochrome pieces, which I'll show you guys in a minute. And it makes it easier. It takes the guesswork out. It takes the swatching out. And while I love to swatch, you know, sometimes you just want to do like a monochrome marker piece and be done with it and it look good. Sometimes you're going on a trip and you don't want to pack all your markers. You just want to grab a couple. So I definitely get the appeal of these themed monochrome sets that in theory blend into one another seamlessly. Does this set do it? This set of green tones? No, it doesn't. I've pointed that out many times. They're dry, they're scratchy, they leave schmutz and grit all over the paper. They are a mix of cool and warm greens that don't necessarily go together super well. They're overpriced. That's not the biggest sticking point, but it is a big sticking point because you can get fiber brush tip markers that'll deteriorate super quick for way cheaper than this. So it's like you're paying for the privilege to be miserable, which is always fun. But these are just, they're just bad, y'all. Like, there's so many better inexpensive markers. If you want easy monochromes that are like foolproof monochromes, Spectrum Noir makes some pretty good ones. I want to try out their brush tip TriBlend markers. Still Still haven't seen them, so if you know where they sell them, let me know so I can go buy them. If you're looking for cheap, I like the Ohuhu brush markers a lot, actually. I recommend them to libraries that are like, we want to get alcohol markers for our kids to use and learn how to make marker art. That's what I recommend because they're inexpensive and they're actually pretty dang good and the color selection's pretty nice. And I also really like the Blick Studio brush markers, like a whole heck of a lot. You guys hear me mention them a lot because I think they're genuinely great. Prismacolor's kind of overpriced for what they are, but that big old barrel lasts a long time. And I have to say, this smaller barrel was not easier for my arthritic hands to use. So, I don't know. I just wanted to slap a pencil grip on it because it would have made it at least a little bit more comfortable. So, you know, there's like so many better options. If you want a not Copic Japanese alcohol marker, get the Color, get the Neo Pico. Neo Pico often goes on sale. Keep an eye on the Deleter website and you can probably get them for a pretty good price. All right, the inking has been done. Now it's time to ice this cake. We're gonna add some white gouache just to bring in some highlights, to add some liveliness, and to add some surface decoration to Kara's adorable outfit. We're gonna do a paisley on her little shawl, and then we're gonna do a dot pattern on her little shirt, you know, just to add some fun. Because, I mean, it's monochrome, and sometimes you gotta add that back in there. So while I definitely complained about these markers a lot, I did actually have fun making the illustration despite the flaws of the Tombow ABT Pro Markers, and I like how the illustration turned out. It's really cute. It's got strong Jack and the Beanstalk vibes to it. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm gonna scan it. It's a cutie booty. But would I recommend these markers? Well, if you've gotten this far in this review and you haven't left a comment that I'm too snarky about a product that I paid for out of my own pocket using money from my Patreon, which funds these reviews here on this channel, and my patrons fully expect me to occasionally be snarky about a product that doesn't perform super well, well, I mean, I can't recommend them. And I hope that if you are watching this review and considering whether or not these are for you, you skip them. Don't get these. The TriBlend markers are like $3 or no, they're $4.99 really, depending on where you get them if you don't get them on sale. They're $4.99 for the 3 little markers. And even though they're bullet tip markers, and I hate bullet tip markers, they're so much better than these. And they're cheaper, and I like the color selection better, and they're more compact. And I think they're more fun. And I don't get a sponsorship from any of these companies. None of these companies send me money or send me products. They don't know I exist. So these are just my real opinions as a marker artist who is sometimes frustrated by how markers perform or they don't perform. They sure do make a good Instagram flat lay photo though, don't they? All right, let's be fair. Let's do some pros, let's do some cons. The pros, if you don't like larger alcohol markers, these are smaller, and the caps are fairly easy to remove. Some of the other color sets do seem like they're better selected for blending. This set, not so much. And I really do like that tri-tip chisel. I want to see that tri-tip chisel on more markers. The cons, these things are dry. They are not refillable. You cannot replace the nibs. The brushes fray and get gritty and like leave schmutz all over the paper really quick. Like basically after you unbox this thing, they start to die, which is one of the shortest shelf lives I've ever seen on a marker. I think they're kind of overpriced. I haven't seen them at too many places like Michael's, online at Dick Blick, and through the Tombow site, but like Plaza didn't have them, Jerry's didn't have them, so they're not necessarily super common. I do think the Tombow ABTs are a little bit better, but honestly, when it comes right down to it, if we're talking water-based twin tip brush markers, I prefer the Kuretake Art and Graphic Twin. It's got that juicy foam brush tip that is just mwah, so much better. So while these do have some pros, they've got a lot of cons to them, and I hope you guys will rethink picking these up unless Tombow just drastically cuts the price or reconsiders this product and makes some changes. So I do a lot of marker reviews here on this channel. If you need help buying markers, you can always reach out to me. Oh yeah, speaking of the TriBlend markers, here is one of the TriBlend markers. It is a very long marker because it is actually 3 markers in one. Believe it or not, as stumpy as these markers are, I do not have the dryness problems that I had with the Tombow ABT Pro markers. The TriBlends are surprisingly juicier than the ABT Pro. The 3 colors generally coordinate better, although I haven't tried every single TriBlend. I have tried a few. TriBlend is far cheaper than the ABT Pro monotone sets, although you're getting 3-in-1 rather than 5 standalone markers. Spectrum Noir does make alcohol refills, so these are probably technically refillable. Tombow ABT Pro are not. Tombow does not make alcohol refills, so you can't even do it if you want to. The bullet nibs on the Spectrum Noir are less prone to wear and tear, and they're not as prone to tearing up the paper either, which is surprising because bullet nibs tend to be scrubby little dudes. The ABT Pros literally began to flake off onto the page as I was coloring it. And here are a couple of monochrome examples. So that was done with the Hydrangea blend. The one I showed you just prior was done with the coral blend. And I have a couple, I have a green and I have a gold one. That's going to be for the green one. You guys will see that coming up. And then I'm still working on sketching out the gold one. And all of those are originally sketched in colored leads, markered, and then inked with the in fact, that's the green one that I'm going to be using for the grass illustration there. For the Spectrum Noir TriBlend illustrations, I'm using the Tombow Fudenosuke brown brush pen. Oh my, which I really love. I really like the Fudenosuke. So please do not let this review of Tombow ABT Pro turn you off on Tombow as a company in general. In general, I really like their products, and that's partially why I'm so harsh with them right now. It's like, they do good stuff. What is up with this? Why are these not so good? There's probably a reason their Japanese website doesn't even mention them. So thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you guys again soon. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.